there's a lot of dissatisfaction. I think you're right. The promise has been broken, and I think the future looks uncertain. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We shouldn't suffer from collective amnesia. 2-3 years ago, under a different regime, we would not be having this kind of conversation. We have to appreciate the fact that the space for critical voices has opened up under this government, and I think it's up to us to utilize this space. Media freedom has been restored to a large extent. It's up to the media to actually utilize that freedom. Someone mentioned, I think it was Lakshan who mentioned, that civil society is quite weak right now. I agree. Civil society is weak because it is lulled into a false sense of sort of complacency, because it assumes that this government will continue to operate perpetually, and that's not right. We can anticipate that with changes in sentiment. We saw how many people turned up at the Goldface Green May Day rally. We can anticipate that people will be fickle, and this government will also have its sort of sunset clause. I do think that we need to hold on to this space that has been provided to us. I think we do need to continue to be critical of government policy, but we must not lose sight of the fact that this is a space that has been secured due to the regime change, and we shouldn't really cut our noses to spite our faces.
Again, you quite clearly articulate the fact that critical voices are now being heard. They can voice their opinion. However, laws such as the counterterrorism law that the government is intending to pass in the next few months or so is not going to help that, would it?
I agree, but the law hasn't been passed, has it? I've been opposed to the law. Many people have been opposed to the law. They've voiced their opinion in public without much fear. I can take examples of where very repressive laws have been completely blocked. For example, there was a move to bring in a new law that bans hate speech, and that particular provision was replicating the identical provision in the PTA. So we would have had, even despite the move to repeal the PTA, that communal disharmony provision brought in as a new provision in the penal code. We blocked that. The Human Rights Commission came out very strongly against that law, and that law was withdrawn. So there are examples where repressive laws have been prevented, and I think even this new counterterrorism proposal, if there is sufficient civil society opposition and resistance, there is plenty of scope for the law to either be withdrawn or revised and improved significantly, where it comes to a level in which we can accept.
But it has to be opened up to the public, the media, to discuss as a white paper.
And that is a problem. As I mentioned before, there's a principal reason and a practical reason to open up the process to public scrutiny. I believe the Human Rights Commission has to be engaged on this particular subject, because under the Human Rights Commission
Human Rights Commission is not aware about the National Human Rights Action Plan. So do you think that the Human Rights Commission will have a say on a matter like this?
That's not true, actually. The Human Rights Action Plan was shared with the Human Rights Commission.
After it was published?
No. I was part of the drafting committee of one of the thematic groups, and I'm aware of the fact that the draft was published, rather it was disseminated amongst several actors, which included the Human Rights Commission. And
did they really have a say on the Human Rights Action Plan, or was it just given because it has to be given?
I think it was a tick in the box, but the feedback of the Human Rights Commission was taken on board. But at the end of the day, if it's
a tick in the box, it's not really meeting the purpose, is it?
I do believe that the Human Rights Commission's feedback was taken on board. This has to be contrasted with...
But that was not reflecting in the final paper that was out.
But have you read the final paper? The final paper does have a lot of improvements based on the Human Rights Commission's feedback.
I think you need to
contrast this with the counterterrorism proposals, because in the counterterrorism proposals, there is a role for the Human Rights Commission to play as a monitoring body. And the Human Rights Commission has a mandate to advise and assist the government in the formulation of legislation. It's in the Human Rights Commission Act. Now, if these proposals are not shared with the Human Rights Commission, it can't fulfill its mandate. So that is problematic. And I would say over and above the Human Rights Action Plan, the counter-terrorism proposals need to be shared with the Human Rights Commission.
That has not been done.
That has not been done.
Will it be done?
I hope so.
Thank you very much, Gehan. You're not in the drafting committee, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
So let's open the floor for questions from our journalist. Sonali has been waiting to pose a question from Gehan, so I open the floor for Sonali. Yes, Sonali.
Thanks, Shamir. Good guess. Gehan, media is supposed to be the fourth pillar of governance. We're supposed to engage in expressing opinion, critical reportage, participating in forming public opinion. However, the Independent Council for News Media Standards Act, the first draft, which has been released publicly and online, sort of tries to bring in this concept of state oversight. Do you think this will go down well with Sri Lankan media? And do you think we should really be okay with this?
I can tell you at the outset, if this law is passed in this form, the media institutions will be facing a lot more than temporary blackouts. It'll be very, very serious because the law has several problematic provisions. I can point to some of those problematic provisions, but before doing so, I think it's important to take stock of the problem and the solution that has been proposed. The problem is media ethics. I think we need to concede and acknowledge that there is a problem with media ethics in this country. Now, the solution that has been proposed, mainly due to the fact that the regulatory body that is currently in place to regulate the media and entertain complaints from the public is dysfunctional. I think because of that dysfunction, there is this new solution that has been brought forward, which is an independent council. This is anything but independent. I'm very glad that Mr. Kodutakku raised the issue of the Constitutional Council, because the Constitutional Council is the institution that is supposed to recommend the appointments to this independent council. But the Constitutional Council comprises 7 MPs and 3 non-political actors. We can't expect the council to actually ensure independence. So the appointment procedure is going to be deeply flawed. This council is not going to be independent. And I believe that a statutory institution to replace media-driven, industry-driven regulation is not a good idea, because once again we will suffer from collective amnesia. It wasn't 2-3 years ago that this media in the country was oppressed. It was under severe pressure from the government. And we can anticipate the same thing in the future if we allow councils of this nature to regulate the media.
I'd like to draw your attention.
Sonali, just a second. You spoke about temporary blackouts. What we experienced a couple of minutes ago was definitely not a censorship that we experienced nearly 3 years ago when the Satna political program was aired. At this very station, at this very studio, we had the then common candidate coming and voicing his opinions on our program, and then we had a censorship. So what we experienced a couple of minutes ago was definitely not a censorship. It was due to the weather. Yes, Sonali, you can continue.
Gehan, I'd like to draw your attention to Section 9 of the proposed Act. The right not to disclose sources. It says no one may be required to reveal information identifying a source who has provided information on a confidential basis to a news media outlet. However, there's an exception.
Absolutely.
So this is very dangerous, isn't it?
I'm glad you raised that exception, because the exception refers to national security. And if you look at the right to information bill determination, the Supreme Court presents a very problematic definition and interpretation of this concept of national security. It even includes economic related activity like trade agreements. So national security is an open-ended concept. Now, the moment you include an exception of this nature, journalists can expect to be put under enormous pressure to reveal their sources. And in a situation where the judiciary is quite conservative, you can expect the judiciary to also comply with the requests of a security institution that says we need to know the whereabouts, the identity of a source. And international standards will tell you that under no circumstances, and particularly on national security grounds, should a journalist be compelled to reveal a source.
Gyan, when you take a look at what was happening at the previous government, as you mentioned, there was intimidation, assault, kidnapping, and even murder when it came to journalists, when it came to other human rights activists. The CTA, is this government's way of intimidating people?
That's a bold claim. I wouldn't say the CTA is particularly formulated for that purpose. But what it does is give the government a toolkit. And then it is anyone's guess as to what this government or a future government can do with that toolkit. And that toolkit is problematic because the toolkit can be used against journalists, particularly those who are critical of government, as it has been done in the past. And not just journalists, but even political opponents like Azad Salih, who all he did was really criticize the government for failing to investigate violations against the Muslim community. And he was arrested under the PTA provision.
Mr. Dias, do you agree with what Mr. Gunatilak has to say about the CTA? My question to you once again is the CTA this government's way of intimidating people or journalists or human activists in the political sphere?
They can use it again. I mean, as it happened in the past. I mean, initially it was not meant for the repress or the stop dissent, but it used over the years by all the governments since 1979. So it can happen. I mean, if even it might not happen within this government, but the next government or even this government. So there is no guarantee once the CTA is enacted that they will not use it against to stop dissent. So I mean, we have to expect any government, when there is lack of democracy, when there is no proper rule of law in practice, it can happen. So we have to, one way we have to ensure the democratic practices and also rule of law. That's one way that we can create stopgaps. But in the other hand, when they get majorities in the parliament and when they decide to do anything if they want to do, what they want to do, like 18th Amendment, all these things can reverse back. So then they said, okay, there is an enemy, so to stop the enemy, we have to use this, as Gihan said, toolkits. And these toolkits will go against the public, civil society, journalists, anybody go against them. So it's how it's happened in other countries as well. It's not a strange thing. But the question comes, okay, why then this kind of CTAs, it's countries like UK, it's not happening? Because they have democracy, because they have rule of law. These are the stopgaps to prevent abuses by CTA. So if we want to proper management of CTA, you have to ensure rule of law and democracy.
These were promises of this government when it came to power, and 2 years have gone, and as you said, we have to go into another election very soon. Dr. Mahanameo, I want to direct a question to you. We see decisions being taken by the cabinet. We saw how the Office of Missing Persons came into power. RTI, though a good thing, we saw how it came into power. We once again saw how the parliament is under utter chaos. Do you think that the cabinet of ministers, when they meet up for their discussions to take important decisions on the country, do you think they go through at least the cabinet paper that is given to them before they approve it?
Before that, how many parliamentary members use the library? There is a full-fledged library in the parliament. Just ask from the librarian, before any debate, how many read, how many participate. According to my knowledge, only JVPs are using it. So there are a lot of resources and they are not ready for many things. Now, what my main argument is, any election, people wish is very important. Now, for example, when this government came to power, a lot of promises were given. Everyone can have a car. But what will happen to that? Now, these are some of the promises, because
exactly.
it was a promise given.
Yeah.
So I am not undermining any political party. That's how they want to come to power.
Yes.
But the main issue here, cabinet, there is no collective agreement. Now we know basically what decision taken in the cabinet. One minister is saying one thing, another minister is saying another thing. Now going to appoint another spokesman, cabinet spokesman. So 3 cabinet spokesmen are there. Tell me any country whether you have 3 cabinet ministers. Because you have to satisfy SLFP. You have to satisfy another party. You have to satisfy TNE. So all these things are happening. Finally, what will happen in the country? Just satisfying political parties only. So the latest version is another new cabinet spokesman from Sri Lanka Freedom Party. Is that a people aspiration? So this is where even this government also having a big problem keeping all these things together. So the leadership must be strong than this. So that's why even the so-said cabinet reshuffle still not there. If it is the president can immediately come up with. He explained the law very clearly. I mean, this is where whether you go unity with this or whether you divide. In the cabinet meetings, president has to satisfy all. That's the issue. So they are not taking any decision for the country. First thing, dispute resolution institution today cabinet. So several ministers are saying several things. Okay, satisfy them. Then 2 hours or 3 hours gone. So what is the decision taken for the country? So I mean today my basic definition, cabinet is a dispute resolution among the ministers. Because you have to satisfy. Otherwise the government may collapse.
Dr. Mahanameva, leave alone the parliament library, the cabinet ministers may not be even reading the cabinet papers.
Definitely. This is the issue in Port City also.
Mr. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mr. Korithaku, now there are concerns raised in certain quarters that we have allowed international agencies to dictate terms, get involved in reforms, set guidelines for certain bills. Is this a genuine concern?
Because now we have played into their hands basically. Now Sri Lanka, you know, when granted independence, Sri Lanka was an absolutely independent country. We did not owe a single cent to outside nations, the world. We are absolutely independent. Today, this cannot survive at all without the foreign aids. So we just had to, these people are now forced to play into their hands. It's a very unfortunate incident. That's what happened all over. So many laws in this foreign exchange bill, this then this inland revenue bill, the customs bill. Who, I mean, to satisfy whom? Either the local community, the people of this country? No, it is not that. To satisfy the international community. So this is the failure of the government of Sri Lanka for how many years now? 70 odd years. All the political parties must take the full responsibility for failing the nation. I can straight away say, with any hesitation, I will say Sri Lanka is a failed state. That's my view.
Mr. Korithaku, at the same press conference that you mentioned, where the finance minister held a press conference last evening, he mentioned about bringing in new taxes like the withholding tax, and he mentioned about other reforms that will be done. But he himself said that there is a less amount of tax files in the country. While it is the responsibility of the people to pay the taxes, the government has failed in earning these revenues when there are tax exemptions of about 45 million to MPs or parliamentarians. What do you have to say about this?
Now, there has to be a tax collection mechanism. Inland Revenue, Customs and Excise Department, they are the major revenue generating agents. Customs collect about 60% of the government revenue. There is no point keep on increasing the tax component on certain commodities. For example, this electric car. So this part of the world, whereas in the other parts of the world, they keep on reducing. And in London, it's absolutely, even for the congestion fees, absolutely exempted. And there is no road tax for the electric car. Whereas here, when this, at the very inception, it's only 5%. So the government rely in this country, the highest revenue generating component, the commodity is motor vehicle. So they keep on increasing tax on motor vehicle. It's a penal tax today. What is the rate of vehicle, the duty for this Land Cruiser, this Toyota Jeep? 300%. So I can guarantee you, I will pay you 1 million reward. Show me any vehicle in this country running on the road or which have been imported on payment of duty. I challenge you, not a single vehicle. All these vehicles have been imported under different categories of these permit schemes without paying a single cent. So you remember some time back when Mr. Rajapaksa was there, this car importing community, they get government to introduce different kind of permit scheme. Even for these Mahanayakas and this the Buddhist priests, they were given permits for what? Do you think for them to import vehicle and use? No, this is just to accommodate this car importing community, for them to import vehicles and sell it in the open market, because there is no way person can import a vehicle at the rate of payment of 300% tax for this Indian Maruti small car. Do you know how much tax element? Whereas these people get paid, not a single cent they pay for this vehicle. For this poor man who bring this 600cc car, 300%, it's about 2 million. Can they afford it? Go and check with the car dealer center, this Indian small car, over 3 million now. So they have to satisfy this legislature, people in the legislature and the executive, and who has to bear the costs? The poor people. So
Mr. at the end of the day, it's the people at the end of this entire mechanism. People have to pay the brunt at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And this is not the way to move forward. Mr. S, what do you think? What should be the way forward? How must we arrest this situation?
No, I think we have to look for alternatives. As all of us said, what we have today is not alternative. If the same old people are going to come, we won't get anything out of. So, as I said earlier, like the civil society is getting weak. I think we have to strengthen the civil society. That's one way, and then we must engage with the opposition is another way of handling it. But also, with all these things, we have to search for alternatives. Good example, Emmanuel Macron. 3 years ago, he is nobody. Just a minister of the parliament. But today, he's the president of France. I think we can find good alternatives. There will be good people if we're really searching for. So I think we have to get away from this traditional mindset of this two-party system or three-party system. We have to look for, I'm always, with all the shortcomings, I think even someone like Kejriwal, we have to look for in our society. We don't have Kejriwals in our society. People are criticizing about him, his new politics, that's separate. But we don't have people of that nature. I think we have to look for people, we have to look for alternatives. We are so much stagnated in our present situation, we cannot see alternatives.
Mr. Lakshan Dias, one question to you. Something that we find to be true when it comes to a lot of new pieces of legislation is the lack of discourse, the lack of multi-stakeholder discussion. So people and stakeholders really are left in the dark most of the time. But if we move beyond the pieces of legislation and go to agreements such as ETCA, the Hambantota Port Agreement, this still rings true. We're talking about transparency and fostering a culture of openness. However, the truth is something completely different when it comes to a lot of pieces of legislation as well as agreements. How do you view this? And moving forward, what's the way out of this?
I think, and there was a huge opposition when it came to the port city, because we were not aware about what are the repercussions, what are the future consequences of the environmental side of it and the financial side of it. But finally, with the new government, it's continuing. And we also criticize the Hambantota port building and still continuing. So the issue is, as Mr. Kodutoko said, that we have given out everything to foreign hands. We became, slaves of this whole debt trap.
Or is it a question of correct information not being properly disseminated among the public?
Well, who bothers? Even the correct information shared with the public, who leads them? That is the issue. That is where I'm saying the center of civil society moving into different directions. I'm scared about it. Because what I'm saying, the center of civil society is moving into the hands of the nationalistic forces, where they only see grabbing power of the country, where there's no guarantee in future that there will be a transparency at all. Because then, if the center of the civil society will move into the hands of the nationalistic forces, they only take the nationalism as the front banner, and they lead the society into total difference. So that is where I'm proposing we need to look for people like Kejriwal or Macron into our society who can bring new dimensions into the Sri Lankan society. Without doing that, I don't think we can. There's no use of talking about all the corruptions, all these international treaties, all these issues that we have gone through in the past. Because what happened, the next government will do the same thing.
Again, talking about the implementation of existing laws with regard to issues such as domestic violence, then university ragging, we don't see laws in existence being properly implemented. Why is this? We have a proper legal system, a functioning legal system, we have law enforcement authorities, but still there are lapses in the system. How do we go about correcting these flaws?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer, and I don't have a straightforward answer to that, because it takes a lot of institutional transformation to really start implementing laws better and to really build the institutional capacity to do so. But you're absolutely right. The Domestic Violence Act is a good example of laws not being implemented appropriately and sufficiently. I'll take another example. We have something called the ICCPR Act, number 56 of 2007. That has criminalized hate speech. We went around like headless chicken looking for a law to invoke against those who engage in hate speech. In 2014, we had a law, and we just didn't use it. And to my knowledge, it has never been used to prosecute anyone who has engaged in hate speech when we have a very serious problem with hate speech in the country. So absolutely right that there's a serious problem with implementation of laws, but I think this is a longer conversation, and it's going to require a lot of institutional transformation if we're serious about implementing these laws. But there are some laws that are in the pipeline that we don't want implemented. We want to avoid them coming into reality in the first place, and the counterterrorism law is one such law. Because it will remain dormant perhaps under this government, but under a future government we might see it invoked, particularly against opponents.
Dr. Mahanamaheva, your response to that question.
2005 Domestic Violence Act, it is not basically only the implementation. See, the magistrates, if any domestic violence case filed, certain magistrates, what's their view? You all are husband and wife. You have to live together. Even that, some magistrate, they tolerate. So the awareness is number one. In the Judicial Service Commission, must come to one stand. This domestic violence, we have done a lot of research in the universities. Certain magistrates, they don't want to take this, because this is a family issue. And also some judges, they think all these economic burden taken by husband, sometimes one or two words may come out, offensive words, so you must tolerate. See, this is the real scenario, not only the implementation. You have to come to grassroots level. Wife, go and complain to nearest police station. Some policemen, they are not taking that complaint. Go home, sleep. This is the issue.
So you're advocating for training of these officials,
not only
an attitudinal
police,
shift. What is it that you're
magistrates, definitely you must be given a good awareness. Not only that, section 365A, same issue is there. So we blame the implementation part. No, beyond that, Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission, when we were there, 2006 on to 2012, there was a human rights National Action Plan. One and only task given for Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission at that time is what? Education and awareness. When Dr. Navanidan Pillai visited, you were only given one task, education. Other than that, you can propose certain, to international conventions. You can recommend to government. That's why Universal Periodical Report, UPR, we prepared in 2012. In the combined UPR, Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka recommends to ratify the second optional protocol of ICCPR. So there have a lot of things we do. But the major thing, even that was not aware by the government. So implementation part, I mean, police, judges must be more aware. Otherwise, Domestic Violence Act may not come a reality, because this is a carbon copy of Indian Act.
Dr. Mahanam Meheva, however, as a former commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, you would agree that even the Human Rights Commission itself is rather toothless, given the fact that
definitely. So we
can only give in recommendations.
We have made amendments to Human Rights Commission Act, which is lying at that time Ministry of Justice. Even we give a recommendation, many people are not following. I mean, Human Rights Commission is not a institution like courts. It's basically, we can most of the time create a culture to respect human rights, to promote and protect, but most of them are not doing. At that time, the presidential secretariat said, if anyone is not following your recommendation, send it there. But even we made a recommendation like 1990 National Language Commission Act. If a recommendation not implemented, submit that as a certificates to Provisional High Court even through that to implement, but it was not. I don't know what happened after that.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts in the first, second and third and fourth rounds. Before we move into a short commercial break, a very quick question from Mr. Naganand Kurituaku. Mr. Kurituaku, you always say about public funds being misused. I want to drag your attention to the account that you created after the Mitramula garbage issue. The name of the account is Garbage Victims Fund, opened in the Bank of Ceylon in Nugegoda branch. The account number is 807-24205. I want to know how much of money have you been able to collect from this fund?
Now the others also, that shows the lack of interest the public in the people. So I contributed 100,000 rupees out of my pocket. Okay?
Right.
And I observed some Sri Lankans from abroad, they have contributed. And because you know that people are
at least the media is closely watching you, so
yeah, I know because this, every person is waiting.
So how much of money have you collected?
I really did not check the bank account, but I know I get a lot of information from abroad. Then because
so when you collect this money, you have to give it to the victims at the end of the day.
No.
When are you planning to check this account?
There will be a final day. I have now. This MP thing has gone up to 100 now. So I made the change in this campaign. I said, at least now. Earlier I demanded 1 million rupees from each MP.
Now you say 100,000.
I used 33 million and half of public funds. I said, I will reduce it to 100,000. Out of 33 million and half, you defrauded. I mean, at least.
That's why I want to know how much of money is now collected in your account.
Because
can you do a quick check when we go for a short commercial break and come back? Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay, so we'll do that as well. We go for a short commercial break. I give Mr. Naganand Kurituaku the final opportunity to talk when we finish off the round. So we're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. Interesting facts, interesting thought. You want to know how much money is collected? Stay connected. We're going for a short commercial break. This is Face the Nation. Let's start off the final round with Mr. Lakshan Dias, attorney at law as well as human rights activist. Mr. Dias, again I pose this question to you. End of the year, what changes do you wish to envisage in the governance structure in Sri Lanka? If this government is to sustain themselves, move forward, ensure there's good governance and transparency, what must they really do? Your time starts now.
Well, I don't see much hopes on that, but at least if before end of the year, if we can bring the new constitution, I'm happy about that. But I have no big hopes on that also, because there's no clarity on it, what is going to happen. So my very clear answer is I have no hopes.
No hopes. What is the message for the government? Let's say hopes aside. Mr. Kurituwaku said that he has lost all faith in governments and Sri Lanka is a failed state. I'm sure you have at least a bit of light at this end of this dark tunnel.
Yeah, well, one thing, we have to have hopes on the rule of law, because I mean we have to depend on the judiciary. But other than that, at the rate of things are happening, and at the rate of this coalition government is going on, well, we have to be happy about the freedoms and everything what we got, I mean, which was not part of the previous regime. But other than that, I don't see any big changes I mean, when it comes to about years' time. So that it will be the same old corruption, same old system will continue. So that in this case, I think we all must come together and look for alternatives. That's no other option.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lakshan Das. I now move my attention to Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva. Dr. Mahanameheva, elections. You spoke of this in the first round. One thing is clear, there is no set date for the local government polls. However, the government has said that there will be elections for 3 provincial councils. Do you think that an alternative is needed in these provincial councils?
I firmly believe even a government make a statement I can't trust today, because next day it can change, because several cabinet ministers say several things, you also say like that. So even the provincial council election that has to be planned in September and October, yes, there should be an alternative. This alternative should be best for the country, because whatever promised, now we can see it all turning the other side. That is where even the cabinet reshuffle, I'll make a humble request to reduce that to 30. That is the best cabinet then. But they are not doing so. They try to give several ministerial posts for the others also. So this is a double jumbo cabinet finally. So what will happen? Even the people voice is very important. I am not sure. You have to go for a vote and see. But look here, people are living with lot of issues. Rather than law and order or peace, they need something to eat. So economic issues must be addressed. Civil and political rights, you may have 100% in Sri Lanka, but if there are no economic, social and cultural rights, that is the end of a government.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva. Some interesting thoughts indeed. I now move my attention to Gehan Gunatilaka, Research Director of Vijay Research and also an attorney at law. What message do you have for the government, Gehan?
Well, I think the people have expectations for dramatic change, and I think those expectations need to be taken seriously. But at the same time, I think all of us, not just government, has to take stock of what we need as ingredients for those changes to be a reality. And I think media freedom and civil society space are absolute essentials. And it's in that context that I'm deeply worried about the laws that are in the pipeline. We have a law that would trade media freedom for media ethics. And we have another law that for the purpose of national security might substantially reduce the space for opposition and dissent. So if we're serious about change, if we're serious about a transformation, we also have to dig in our heels and take stock of our situation and safeguard some of those ingredients, such as media freedom and civil society space.
Thank you very much, Gehan, for your thoughts as well in the first round. In the final round, I now move my attention to Mr. Kurituwaku. Mr. Kurituwaku, I did not see you calling the bank and checking the balance, so I'm not going to ask you what the balance is on that particular account that we mentioned before. But what do you have to say for the government?
The government has let down the people, and the opposition is trying all attempts are made to get back to power. We have to speak about the truth. The absolute truth is, in this country, there's a total failure of the rule of law, and the people's democratic rights but I mean the executive power and the legislative power is being abused to the maximum. And therefore, I still have a great hope in the judiciary, which exercise the people's judicial power on trust, at least to restore the rule of law in this country. Without the rule of law, there is nothing we can do about it. That is why the people in the legislature and the executive behave in this manner. They believe there will be no rule of law. They can easily get away from any offences that they commit. So that is why there's a special provision in that particular Inland Revenue Bill to exempt. They have done away with all penal sanctions. I don't want to mention any particular individual. There was a reason for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nagahandha Kutuaku, Attorney at Law. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, Lakshan Dias, Attorney at Law, as well as human rights activist, for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Pratibha Mahanamheva, a former Commissioner of the Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission, for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, Gihan Gunathilaka, Research Director, Director of Research and Attorney at Law, for joining us this evening. And thank you very, very much, Mr. Nagahandha Kutuaku, Attorney at Law, for joining us this evening. Last time that you were on the show, you were quite upbeat. Today you have toned down a lot. I wish that, as Lakshan said, civil rights activists need to voice their opinion, and I hope this in any way would not silence you in the future and ensure that you go from strength to strength. I leave you tonight with some observations made by the four speakers today. Lakshan Dias, in his final remarks, said, "No hope, there won't be no major change by the end of this year." And we had Mr. Nagahandha Kutuaku saying that this is a failed state. And also we had Gihan Gunathilaka saying that people have a lot of expectations. The government needs to take stock and ensure that we move forward. And some interesting thoughts by Dr. Pratibha Mahanamheva, stating that any alternative should be best for the country. Thank you very much, Chaturanga. Thank you very much, Sonali. Thank you very much, Charita, for joining us this evening on the show. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. If history repeats itself and the unexpected always happens, how incapable must man be of learning from experience? Take care and good night.